here today to tell you that there is a hazard threatening our communities. It's one that most of us don't see, many deny even exists, but it's harmful to us all the same. Now, I'm not talking about something in the water like Flint, Michigan, or methane like Aliso Canyon gas leak. Think something more like Zika. It spreads quickly. Once it's entrenched, it's difficult to eradicate and has to have a carrier to survive. And then what if I told you we're the carriers, you and I? We've become infected and we don't even know it, and we're passing it from one to another, even to our children. I'm talking about implicit bias. Implicit bias is a bias we don't know we have. It's unconscious. And because we don't know we have it, we can't know how it might come out in our everyday judgment and actions. But just because we don't see our own implicit biases, it doesn't mean that they aren't real or that others don't see and feel them. Now, implicit bias is different from explicit bias. Explicit bias is a bias that we know we have and we freely admit to others. For example, I have a bias for research and facts. I don't typically accept new ideas without the research and facts to back them up. Implicit bias is also different from something we call hidden beliefs. And those are beliefs that we know we have, but we don't want to admit to others. For example, it's not uncommon for people to believe that overweight or obese people are lazy. You might believe it, you might think it, but not say it. The implicit bias is different from both of those because it's unconscious. But it's accepted science today that much of our behavior operates outside of our conscious thought and explicit control, and that can really ratchet up when we're stressed or tired. But the researchers have given us some great techniques to be able to detect and measure these implicit or unconscious biases of ours. At the Project Implicit website, there are tests to measure 14 different types of implicit bias, everything from age to sexuality to race, even presidential preference. Okay, so about this time you're probably saying to yourself, surely I would know if I had this thing she calls implicit bias. You know, that's just it. Many of us don't know. And you might be surprised, as I was, to learn that I have a moderately strong implicit bias against women in science and technology. I know. How could I have a bias against women? Against women in my own profession? So trust me, it wasn't something I chose to believe. It wasn't something I wanted to believe. It was a product of my life experiences, of my exposures, something I caught, kind of like that virus we were talking about. And now that I know I have it, I definitely don't want to pass it on to others, and I don't want to find myself making it more difficult for other women to be successful, and I don't want to inhibit the next generation of women programmers. So you can see that implicit bias is real, it's measurable, it can be surprising to us, but you'll also see that sadly it can be both pervasive and toxic. Now this next section is based on research, not stereotype. So research tells us, remember my bias for research, research tells us that implicit bias plays a role in the things that we'll cover next. It may not be the only contributor, but it is a significant contributor. Meet Tyshawn, he's 5. Research tells us that seeing the faces of black boys as young as 5 years old can trigger thoughts of guns and violence. Maybe that just happened to you when I showed you Tyshawn's picture. And as early as preschool, Tyshawn will be more likely than his white friends to face harsh discipline at school. So you won't be surprised then when I tell you that across our country, in our secondary schools, African American boys are 3 times more likely than their white peers to be suspended. And by 10, Tyshawn will likely be judged less innocent than white boys in potential criminal situations, even under the same circumstances. And by 13, he'll have to be cautious, as it's been shown that in critical situations, police can often mistake African American boys as young as 13 for adults, affecting the amount of force that they use. And then sadly, by age 18 or 19, Tyshawn will be 9.5 times more likely than his white peers to be in prison. So imagine with me for a minute how many people Tyshawn might encounter between 5 and 19 who've been infected with this harmful implicit bias. maybe daycare workers, teachers, principals, shopkeepers, strangers, other kids, police, jurors, judges, maybe you and me. And I didn't choose this example to reinforce a stereotype or suggest a foregone conclusion. Certainly not. I chose this illustration to highlight to you how heavy a burden implicit bias can place when it really piles on to a single group or a single individual, and just how young it can start. So there's another side to the coin of implicit bias. Tony Greenwald, in his book Blind Spot, tells us that implicit bias is even more likely to appear as repeated small favoritisms towards people in our own in-group as it is discrimination against people in an out-group. So imagine going through life floating on a cloud, being lifted up by 1,000 tiny boosts of people all around you. And as you experience these boosts, you either don't notice them, you tell yourself that's how the world should work, or you take it for granted. And if you do notice it, you probably chalk it up to luck, maybe great networking. Perhaps you even tell yourself, I earned it. Now accumulate that over a lifetime, over generations, and you begin to get a glimpse at how implicit bias can contribute to privilege. After all, I was just helping somebody else like myself. How can that be bad? But here's the deal with implicit bias. Implicit bias certainly plays a role in racial injustice. But make no mistake, it goes beyond race. It harms more than one group. It can diminish some even as it's lifting others up. And it's the harshest at the intersection, or where it really piles on. And all the while operating just outside of our conscious awareness. Now you are probably like me. We think of ourselves as good people. We volunteer, we sponsor that angel at Christmas, we give to the United Way, maybe we even serve on a nonprofit board. But if you are still not convinced that good people like us can be part of this problem, then ask yourself this question. How is it that at a time when more and more of us say we're open-minded, how is it that there are so many people in our communities who are still being systematically shut out, limited in their potential, or worse? I know we don't want to for a minute think that it's our own behavior contributing to this toxic environment. But it is. It is. So that's why I'm really grateful for this next part. We're all in this together. You see, we all have implicit biases. Every one of us is normal. It's natural. It's how our brain works, how we're wired. It's how our brain helps us to quickly make sense of a complicated world. It's just that sometimes these unconscious biases of ours, they can be different from our own conscious intent and our own personal values. And when that happens and they're left unchecked, there can be harmful, even toxic consequences, which is why I'm also grateful that they can be changed. They may not be easy to change, and it certainly won't be easy to make the change stick. It's a lot like changing a bad habit. Still, they can be changed. And that is really great news that our communities need to hear now as much as ever. And TEDxGreenville, it is my wish, my hope, that the end of this talk could become the beginning of a movement I would like for us to call the Community Detox Challenge. And there is no place better to start than right here, right now, in our own community, in our own backyard. But trust me, it won't be easy to meet this challenge. We will need to dig deeply. We'll need to look inward at our own implicit biases, and then reach out into the community and together do the hard work of rooting out toxic implicit bias. But we can do this if we start where we are, if we start here, if we start small. Because you see, Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Thank you.